The wind howled like a hungry beast, tearing through the broken walls of the crashed human scout ship. Metal creaked and groaned in protest, as if the wreckage itself wanted to escape the freezing night. Mark pulled his sleeping bag tighter around his shoulders, but the cold bit through it like sharp needles. He could see his breath misting in the dim light of the emergency lamp. He wasn't supposed to be here alone. The mission was simple: survey the alien planet for resources. But then, everything went wrong. A storm struck, the ship's controls failed, and now Mark was stranded, cold, and alone on a strange planet no one knew much about. Or so he thought. A soft sound caught his ear, barely louder than the wind. It wasn't the groan of metal or the hiss of cold air. It was a whimper, faint, broken, and filled with pain. Mark froze. His hand instinctively reached for the small knife on his belt. Not much, but it was all he had. He listened carefully, eyes scanning the dark corners of the wreckage. Then he saw her. Crouched in the shadows, barely lit by the emergency lamp, was a figure. Small, thin, and trembling. At first, Mark thought it was a child, but then his eyes adjusted. Her skin was pale with a soft glow, almost like moonlight trapped under her flesh. Strange markings, like faint tattoos, traced along her arms and neck. Her hair was long silver white, messy and tangled. And her eyes large, glowing faintly blue, staring at him with fear and exhaustion. She was alien. Mark's heart pounded. He had read reports about some intelligent life on this planet, but no human had made contact yet. Was she dangerous? Could she even understand him? He didn't know. But she was shivering violently, her arms wrapped around herself, trying desperately to stay warm. For a moment, Mark hesitated. He was cold too. His sleeping bag was barely enough for one. The logical thing was to stay away, let the alien be. If she attacked, he was defenseless. But something inside him stirred. Maybe it was the human instinct to help. Maybe it was loneliness eating at his mind. He slowly unzipped his sleeping bag halfway and gestured to her. "If you stay there, you'll die," he said softly, unsure if she could understand. "Come here, it's warmer inside." The girl didn't move. She stared at him, confused, scared. But then another cold wind blew, stronger than before, and she whimpered again. Her glowing eyes looked at the sleeping bag, then at Mark, then back again. Slowly, carefully, she crawled closer. Every movement was shaky, as if her body could give up any moment. Mark didn't move. He let her come at her own pace. When she reached the edge of the sleeping bag, she paused, as if asking for permission without words. Mark nodded gently. She slid inside, careful and cautious. The bag was narrow, designed for one person. Now with two inside, they were pressed close, their bodies almost touching. Mark could feel the icy coldness of her skin. She shivered uncontrollably, even within the limited warmth of the bag. Without thinking too much, Mark wrapped an arm around her thin shoulders, trying to share his body heat. She tensed at first, then slowly, relaxed. Minutes passed in silence. The wind continued to scream outside, but inside the bag, a fragile peace settled. Mark could hear her breathing, still shaky but steadying. Then she whispered something. It was soft, a language Mark couldn't understand. Her voice was musical, gentle but weak. She pressed her hand lightly against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Her glowing eyes looked up at him, filled with curiosity and something else. Gratitude. Mark smiled slightly. "Yeah, that's my heart. Still alive, for now." She didn't understand the words, but she understood the kindness. Her body pressed closer, seeking warmth. Mark was still cautious, but he didn't push her away. "Guess it's too cold to stay strangers," Mark muttered to himself. The alien girl closed her eyes, her breathing slowly matching his. She was still a mystery, still a stranger, but in that frozen night, under the broken metal and starlit sky, two lonely beings shared warmth, and neither of them knew that this Simple act of kindness would change both of their lives forever. Mark barely slept. He could feel every slow, careful breath the alien girl took beside him. Her body was still cold, but less than before. Every time the wind roared outside the shattered ship, she flinched closer. At first, Mark thought it was just her instinct to stay warm. But as minutes passed, he realized something. She wasn't just shivering from the cold. She was scared. Her body was trembling, not just from freezing, but from exhaustion. And fear. Mark shifted slightly to get more comfortable, but the moment he moved, she pressed herself tightly against him, her thin hands clutching his arm. Her head rested near his shoulder, and Mark felt the cool strands of her hair against his neck. He didn't know her species, didn't know if this was normal behavior or something else. But in that moment, she wasn't an alien. She was just a girl trying to survive. Suddenly, she spoke. Her voice was a soft whisper, barely audible over the wind. Warm. Heart. Mark blinked. She was speaking broken English, but still, words he could understand. "You can speak English?" Mark asked, surprised. She tilted her head up slightly, eyes half closed but glowing faintly in the dark. "Learn your language. Not good." "You're doing fine," Mark said with a small smile. "What's your name?" She paused, thinking, as if the concept of name was strange to her. Then she shook her head slowly. "No name, you call whatever." Mark chuckled lightly. "Whatever, huh? That might get confusing." She gave a faint smile. It was small, tired, but genuine. Then she did something unexpected. She reached up and placed her palm flat against his chest again, over his heart. She seemed fascinated by the steady rhythm. Then, still whispering, she asked, "Warm, always? My heart?" "Yeah, it keeps beating. Keeps me alive," Mark replied softly. She nodded slowly. "My kind, no warm inside. Cold, always. Only warm." When close, Mark's heart ached a little at that. A species that was cold by nature, forced to seek warmth from others? Maybe that was why she stayed so close, not just for heat, but because it was the only way she could feel alive. "What should I call you then?" Mark asked gently. She thought for a long moment, then whispered, "Rhea." "Rhea," Mark repeated. "That's a pretty name." Her eyes fluttered halfway closed, but her hand remained over his heart. "Mark," she said softly, trying his name on her tongue. "Mark, warm human." They lay there in silence for a while. Mark could feel his own body relaxing. Despite the situation, despite the strangeness of it all, her presence felt calming. Then suddenly, Rhea stiffened. Her eyes snapped open, glowing brighter. "What's wrong?" Mark asked, his voice low. She didn't answer. Instead, she pressed a finger to her lips, motioning him to stay silent. Then she whispered, "Something outside." Mark's body tensed. He listened carefully. At first, he heard nothing beyond the wind. But then, a low growl. Something was sniffing around the wreckage. Mark cursed under his breath. He had forgotten this planet wasn't empty. There were predators here. He remembered the briefing. Large, night-stalking creatures, drawn to heat and movement. Rhea gripped his arm tightly. "They smell us, too close." Mark's mind raced. They couldn't run, the cold would kill them. They couldn't fight, he had no weapons, and she was too weak. Then, to his surprise, Rhea closed her eyes and started whispering strange words. Her body began to glow faintly, a shimmer passing over her skin. "What are you doing?" Mark whispered. "Hide us," she replied, her voice strained. "Must. Close. Stay very close." Without waiting for permission, she pressed herself fully against him, every inch of her body aligned with his. He could feel her cold frame shiver, but the glow wrapped around both of them, like a faint bubble of light. The growling outside grew louder. Something heavy stomped near the wreckage wall. Mark held his breath. Rhea's hand gripped his tightly. "No sound," she whispered. "No move." Mark nodded, his heart pounding loudly in his chest. The creature outside snarled, sniffed around, claws scraping against metal. Mark's mind screamed to run, to fight, but he stayed still, feeling. Rhea's breath against his neck, her body trembling as she focused her strange power. Minutes passed like hours, then silence. The sound of the predator faded, the footsteps growing distant. Rhea collapsed slightly against him, exhausted. The glow vanished. "You did it," Mark whispered. "You saved us." Rhea smiled faintly, eyes half closed. "Only with your warmth, no strength, alone." Mark held her a little tighter. "Then I guess we're stuck together." She chuckled softly. "Good, not cold now." In that narrow sleeping bag, in a broken ship on a frozen alien world, too. Strangers pressed closer than they ever imagined, bound not just by need, but by something neither could yet explain. The storm outside finally began to calm, but inside the cold metal shell of the wrecked ship, something else stirred. Mark felt Rhea's breathing steady, though her body remained weak against his. Every time the wind had howled, she had curled. Even closer. But now, in the quiet, something had changed between them. Mark wanted to ask her about that light, the glow she'd created to hide them, but before he could speak, he felt her fingers slowly moving. She wasn't shaking anymore. Her hand was tracing along his chest, slow and gentle, as if trying to memorize every line of his form. Mark remained still, unsure whether to speak or just let her explore. She touched his heartbeat again, then his jaw, his cheek. Her skin was still cold, but her touch had grown confident, curious. "What are you doing?" Mark whispered, his voice low and calm. Rhea tilted her head, her glowing eyes watching his face carefully. "Learning," she whispered back. "Human shape ... different." She ran her fingers along his nose, then down to his lips, pausing there. "Soft." "Here," she said softly, her voice almost like a question. Mark chuckled quietly. "That's my mouth. Where words come out." She smiled faintly. "Strange ... but nice." Mark, despite himself, smiled too. "You're pretty strange. Yourself." She seemed to like that answer. Then, with her hand still resting on his face, she asked, "Why help me? You don't know me. Not safe for you." Mark thought about it. Why had he helped? Logic said he shouldn't have. She could have been dangerous, a trick, a trap. But in that moment, seeing her suffer, he couldn't ignore her. "I couldn't just watch you freeze," Mark admitted. "Human instinct, I guess. I help if I can." She nodded slowly, like she was studying his words. "Your heart ... feels. That is worn too." Before Mark could reply, she did something that caught him completely off guard. She pressed her forehead lightly to his. It wasn't a kiss, not a human gesture, but it felt intimate. "What's that for?" Mark whispered, "Sharing, Rhea." Said softly, "In my kind. We touch foreheads to feel each other better. Feel truth." Mark blinked. "Feel truth?" She nodded, closing her eyes. "I feel you are not cruel. You are lonely, like me." Those words hit harder than Mark expected. She was right. He hadn't realized how lonely he was until now, trapped on an alien world, with no way to call for help, thinking no one would find him, and here she was just as lost, just as alone. "What about you?" Mark asked gently. "Why did you let me help you?" "You didn't know if I was cruel." Rhea smiled weakly. "Your heart ... loud and steady, not like hunters. Hunters have ... cold hearts." Mark chuckled under his breath. "So I passed your test, huh? You are warm." "Safe," she whispered. There was a long pause. Then she asked, her voice unsure, "Is ... touch bad for humans?" Mark shook his head slightly. "Not bad. Depends who's touching, I guess." She seemed relieved. Then she pressed herself a little closer, their bodies fitting more naturally together now. She lay her head near his shoulder, her fingers still gently moving against his chest as if it brought her comfort. "You saved me," she whispered. "I want to remember this feeling. So ... I touch. Mark closed his eyes, his body finally starting to relax. Okay, Rhea, touch away. They lay together, not speaking much, but in the dark warmth of the sleeping bag, her fingers mapped his human form, and Mark didn't stop her. Because deep inside, he knew. He didn't want her to stop, for the first time since the crash. Mark didn't feel completely alone. And neither did Rhea. Outside, the storm might have passed, but inside the bag, a silent understanding had formed between two very different beings. Something more than survival. Something human. And something alien, but something real. The night felt quieter than before, but Mark's instincts told him not to trust the silence. The cold was still there, biting the air, but something else had shifted. The wind no longer howled as fiercely, yet a heavy pressure hung over the wreckage like an invisible shadow. Rhea's breathing was slow and steady against him, her hand resting lightly on his chest. She had stopped exploring his face, his body, but her presence stayed close. She had finally warmed up, her skin no longer ice cold, though still cooler than his. Mark was about to drift into a light sleep when he felt her body suddenly stiffen. Her hand tightened slightly, her entire form tense like a stretched wire. Rhea? He whispered cautiously. She didn't answer at first. Then, barely above a breath, she said, "Something ... close." Mark's eyes snapped open. He listened, straining his ears against the distant wind. At first, there was nothing, only the creaking of the broken ship. But then, he heard it too, a faint crunch of footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate. Something was moving outside the wreckage. Mark's mind raced. Could it be another human rescue? No, the steps were wrong. Too heavy, too slow. Then he heard the growl, deep, guttural, not human at all. "What is it?" he whispered urgently. Rhea's glowing eyes stared toward the source of the sound, even though the ship walls blocked their view. "Hunter," she whispered. "Smell us. It knows ... we are here." Mark swallowed hard. He remembered the warnings. About this planet, about creatures that hunted by scent, drawn to heat and life. "We can't fight it," he muttered. "No," Rhea agreed. "It will tear this place open, if it wants." Mark sat up slightly, though the cramped sleeping bag restricted him. "We have to hide." Rhea shook her head. "No time. But ... I try something." She closed her eyes, her body glowing faintly. Again, but weaker than before, the effort strained her. "Stay close, very close," she whispered. Mark didn't hesitate. He wrapped his arms fully around her, pulling her tightly against him. Their faces were close, breaths mingling in the cold air. She whispered strange words in her language, her glow pulsing gently. Mark felt something odd, like a wave of warmth passing through his body, then vanishing. Outside, the footsteps stopped, right next to the ship wall. A long, dragging snarl echoed as claws scraped against the metal. The predator was testing the wreckage, sensing life inside. Mark held his breath. He could feel Rhea trembling, not from cold this time, but from fear and effort. She kept whispering, her glow dimming further. Then something heavy slammed into the wall. The metal bent inward with a loud screech, just meters from where they lay. Rhea whimpered softly. Mark tightened his grip on her, his heart pounding. "Stay with me," he whispered. Trying," Rhea gasped. "Can't. Keep us hidden." Long. Another crash against the wall. Mark could hear the creature's snorting, its growl vibrating through the ship's frame. It was searching, smelling, but Rhea's power masked them barely. "Why's it still here?" Mark whispered. "They hunt by heartbeats," Rhea said weakly. "Yours ... loud," Mark cursed under his breath. He tried to slow his breathing, tried to calm his racing heart, but it was impossible. The fear was too real. Suddenly, Rhea pressed her forehead against his again. Her eyes glowed just slightly. "Trust me," she whispered. Mark didn't know what she was doing, but he nodded. Then he felt it like a soft wave inside his chest. His heartbeat slowed, not by his will, but by hers. Somehow she was calming him, syncing his pulse with hers. Both beating slower, quieter, outside. The creature snarled again, pacing. Then it stopped. Long moments of silence passed. Then the heavy footsteps retreated, the sound growing fainter until it was gone. Mark gasped for air, his heartbeat returning to normal. "You did it," he whispered, looking into her tired eyes. "Not for long," she breathed. "Too weak now." Mark held her close, grateful and awed. She had saved them again, but at a cost. Her glow had faded, her energy nearly spent. "You need rest," he said gently. "You saved us twice tonight." Rhea managed a weak smile. "Because you're warm," Mark chuckled softly. "I'm starting to think that's my only talent." She closed her eyes, resting against him. Enough to survive. As the danger outside finally faded into the night, Mark realized how fragile their safety was. But wrapped together in the narrow sleeping bag, he also realized something else. Mi general sleeping wasn't protecting her alone. They were protecting each other, and that meant something more than just surviving. The silence after the danger passed was heavy, yet Mark couldn't fully relax. Rhea's breathing had grown shallow, her body weak and barely glowing now. She had used too much of herself to keep them hidden, and Mark could feel it. She was fading. He pressed his hand gently against her back. "Rhea? Stay with me," he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, dim blue light barely showing in her gaze. "Tired, but alive," she whispered with a faint smile. Mark shook his head. "You shouldn't have pushed so hard. You could have passed out." "Needed to, or we both die," she said weakly, then closed her eyes again. Mark felt helpless. He didn't understand her powers, but whatever she had done drained her almost completely. His mind raced. He needed a way to help her recover, but how? They had no supplies, no proper shelter, just a thin sleeping bag and broken metal around them. Then he remembered he had seen a faint purple moss growing along the walls of the wrecked ship earlier, almost like fungus. In the mission data, the briefing had mentioned that the moss stored heat and energy. Some of the native species even fed on it. Mark gently eased Rhea's body down, careful not to disturb her fragile state. "I'll be right back," he whispered. She mumbled softly, "No. Stay. But she was too weak to protest further. Mark grabbed his knife and crawled toward the area where he remembered seeing the moss. It was risky. If another predator lurked, he'd have no way to defend himself. But he had to try. Reaching a corner of the ship, he found the glowing purple moss clinging to the walls, pulsing with faint warmth. He scraped as much as he could into a pouch. The moss was sticky, but it radiated gentle heat, and its glow was calming. When Mark returned, Rhea hadn't moved. Her breathing was shallow, her glow almost gone. "Hey Rhea, I got something for you," he said softly, holding the moss near her face. She opened her eyes just slightly. At the sight of the moss, her fingers twitched, weak but eager. "This. Good," she whispered. "Energy. In here." Mark helped guide the moss to her lips. She bit into it gently, her fangs showing briefly. As she chewed, the glow in her skin flickered faintly. "More," she whispered. He gave her more, feeding her carefully until she finished all he had gathered. After a few minutes, her breathing deepened, her eyes brighter. "Better?" Mark asked. She nodded slowly. "Yes, thank you." Mark smiled in relief. "That's what friends are for." She tilted her head. "Friends?" "Yeah. People who help each other," Mark explained. She smiled faintly. "Then I'm your friend." There was a pause. Then she said softly, "But I must show you something." "My truth." "What truth?" Rhea sat up slowly, still weak but recovering. She extended her hand and closed her eyes. Slowly, her body began to shimmer, not just glowing, but shifting. Patterns appeared on her skin like stars forming constellations. Mark watched, amazed. "I'm not just some cold girl," Rhea whispered. "I am a bond kin. My kind. Connect with others. It gives us power. Alone ... we are weak. Together ... we become strong. Bond kin?" Mark repeated. She nodded. "When I touched your heart, when I pressed my head to yours ... I began a bond. It's small, but ... growing." Mark sat stunned. "You mean, we're connected now?" "Yes, your warmth, your heartbeat ... it gives me strength. And my energy ... will protect you." Mark didn't know what to say. He had only tried to help her survive the cold night. But unknowingly, he had formed a connection far deeper than he understood. "Why me?" he asked. Rhea smiled gently. "Because you offered warmth, without asking for anything. That is rare." Mark chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Guess I'm full of surprises." She reached out, taking his hand in hers. Her skin was still cool, but it pulsed gently with life now. "We survive together now, Mark. Bondkin and human, strange but strong." Outside, the night was still cold and dangerous. But inside the wreckage, a bond stronger than fear was growing, an unseen power that neither of them fully understood yet. But both could feel deep inside. And this was just the beginning. Morning arrived slowly on the alien planet, though the sky stayed a dull violet, the sun hidden behind layers of thick, hazy clouds. The cold eased slightly, but inside the wreckage, the air still bit like winter. Mark stirred awake to find Rhea watching him. She was propped on one elbow, her glowing eyes steady, her skin patterns faint but alive again. "You watch me sleep." "Now?" Mark chuckled grudgingly. Rhea tilted her head. "I listen to your heart. It tells me when you are calm." Mark smiled, sitting up carefully. "You and this heartbeat obsession. It's how I know you're alive," she said softly. "In my kind, the heart is life, and life is warmth." Her voice held no mockery, only truth. Mark glanced at her face. Her silver white hair fell over one side, her features sharp yet delicate, undeniably alien but familiar now. "Is it just physical warmth you need, or is there something more?" Mark asked. Rhea seemed thoughtful. "Both, my kind. We survive by bonding, not just touch ... but connection. When we bond, our strength combines. Alone, we fade. Together we shine." Mark frowned. "But your people, where are they? Why are you alone?" Her eyes dimmed, the glow flickering like a dying light. "I ran. I was ... rejected. Weak. I could not bond with others. They left me behind." Mark's heart tightened. She wasn't just a stranger, she was in exile. "That's cruel," he muttered. "That's survival," she replied quietly. "But you ... you offered warmth without a bond. That is rare. No one does that ... not even my own." Mark shook his head. "You shouldn't have been left alone. No one deserves that." She looked at him, her eyes studying his expression carefully. "Humans ... are different. You help ... even when weak." Mark chuckled dryly. "Yeah, some of us. But we get lonely too." Rhea reached out, resting her hand on his. "Then ... we are both lonely." There was a stillness between them. No words. Just an understanding that neither could explain fully. After a pause, Rhea asked, "Do all humans touch like this? Share warmth this way?" Mark laughed. "Not usually. But when we're cold ... yeah, sometimes." She seemed to think deeply, then said, "I want to know more. About you, about humans." Mark smiled. "Fair. But I want to know more about you. Too, what else can bondkin do?" She hesitated, then spoke softly. "When bond grows, I can share sight, thought ... even strength, but only with one ... the one I choose." Mark's breath caught slightly. And have you chosen? She looked at him, her glowing eyes steady. I don't know yet, but I feel safe with you. Mark chuckled nervously. No pressure, huh? She smiled faintly. Only time will tell, but you should eat. You are weaker than you think. Mark nodded, rummaging through his pack for leftover rations. He offered her some, but she declined. I still have energy from the moss, she said. You need food more. They sat together, eating, resting, exchanging glances and questions. Mark explained Earth, cities, rain, music words she didn't fully understand, but her eyes lit up with curiosity. In return, Rhea told him about her world where bond-kin formed. Clusters, living in warmth together, sharing thoughts through touch. A society built not on speech, but connection. But I was always too cold, she admitted, her voice low. No one wanted me near. They said my glow was dim. My bond too weak. Mark's jaw tightened. Their loss, he said firmly. Rhea looked at him, surprised. Then she smiled genuinely, softly. Maybe. Maybe I was just waiting for the right heartbeat, she whispered. Mark didn't know how to respond to that. So he smiled back, feeling his own heart thudding louder in his chest. They both knew the planet was still dangerous, and survival wasn't guaranteed. But in the quiet aftermath of fear, in the wreckage of a broken ship, two beings from different worlds were learning each other's language, not just through words, but through warmth, presence, and the simple truth that neither wanted to be alone anymore. Hours passed, the weak daylight barely reaching the cold wreckage. But Mark and Rhea remained close, sharing stories, memories, and cautious smiles. Despite the danger of the planet, the air between them was warm, strange, but comforting. Mark was starting to feel something he couldn't explain. It wasn't just gratitude or curiosity about Rhea anymore, it was something deeper. But before he could understand it, Rhea stirred suddenly, her expression focused. What is it? Mark asked. Rhea looked toward the broken wall of the ship, her glowing eyes narrowing. I sense more hunters, she whispered, her voice urgent. They come, not one. Many. Mark's stomach sank. More of them? She nodded. They track me. Not just by scent. They sense the bond I carry now. Mark stared at her. Our bond? Yes, she whispered. They can feel it, because it's growing stronger. Mark's heart raced. What do? We can't fight that many. Rhea was silent for a moment, then looked at him with eyes brighter than before. There is one way, but it is dangerous. For both of us. What way? She took a deep breath. Complete the bond. Mark blinked. What does that mean? She moved closer, her voice barely above a whisper. If we complete the bond, I can use your strength. Your heart. Will fuel mine. I will have power to protect us, but it will link us permanently. Permanently? Mark echoed, stunned. Yes. You will feel me. Always, in your mind, your body. I will feel you. It cannot be undone. Mark stared into her eyes. Part of him was terrified. But another part deep inside knew this was right. She wasn't asking out of desperation alone. She was offering trust. What do I have to do? He asked softly. Rhea smiled faintly. Touch my heart, as I touched yours. Press your hand here. She guided his hand gently to the center of her chest, where her glow was faintest. Mark's hand trembled slightly, but he pressed his palm there. Her skin was cool, but beneath it, he felt a flutter like a second heartbeat. Waiting to awaken. Now. Close your eyes, she whispered. Mark obeyed. She placed her forehead to his once more, but this time, there was no hesitation. She whispered words in her language, and suddenly Mark felt warmth. Not physical, but inside his mind. Memories not his own flashed starscapes, strange forests, feelings of cold, of loneliness. And then hope. Then her voice echoed inside his mind, not aloud, but within. You are not alone, Mark. I am here. He gasped, eyes flying open, but Ria's eyes were glowing fully now, her entire body pulsing with soft blue light. Then, she smiled, a real wide smile full of life. It is done, she said aloud. We are bonded. Mark felt different, stronger. He could sense her presence inside him, like a quiet warmth under his skin, a pulse alongside his own heartbeat. What? Now? He asked. Ria stood slowly, her posture no longer frail. Her glow was brighter, her steps steady. She turned toward the broken ship wall. Now I protect you. Outside, the snarls of the predators grew louder. They had arrived. Mark reached for a piece of metal, ready to defend, but Ria raised her hand. No need, she said softly. I feel your strength inside me now. I can fight. Mark watched, stunned, as she stepped forward, her body glowing like a beacon in the gloom. She whispered something in her tongue, and the glow flared, brighter blue waves of energy rippling from her form. A loud roar echoed as the creatures outside hesitated. Sensing the power she now carried, Mark stood behind her, watching in awe as Ria faced the threat, not alone, but with him within her strength. Together, human and alien, two hearts, one bond ready to survive anything this world could throw at them. And as the light shone from her, Mark realized he had come here to explore a planet, but instead he had found someone who was now a part of him forever.